calling attention to the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center towers on September 11th, 2001, and a whole lot more. This is 9/11 Freefall. Hello everybody, this is Andy Steele, and I'm back again for another episode. Now what we do on the show is focus on 9/11 science, truth, and 9/11 truth activism, and we introduce you, the audience out there, to folks out there doing what they can to get the word out about the facts that the Twin Towers and World Trade Center 7 were brought down in a controlled demolition on September 11th, 2001. In particular, we bring attention to Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, a non-profit organization representing currently over 1,700 verified architects and engineers, calling for a real investigation into what really brought down these buildings, as well as thousands of other people standing alongside them. Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth is at the forefront of the 9/11 Truth movement, constantly going to bat for the American people and keeping the truth on the lips of the public, providing some sleepless nights for the people actively trying to keep this crime under wraps. All right, you can keep up on AE 9/11 Truth's efforts and sign the petition, no matter what profession you are, by going to ae911truth.org. There you'll see there are a number of volunteer opportunities for you to make a real difference in your time. Not by repeating mantras of hope and change, but by collaborating with your peers and helping write the rule book for future generations on how to successfully uncover a lie on the scale of the 9/11 crime. Okay, folks, so here we are again, and we got some great guests today, and we'll be getting to them in just a few minutes. I want to go over some 9/11 related news first, and if you check out ae911truth.org, you'll see there's a story up there announcing that the Toronto hearings report is now available. Now, if you don't know what the Toronto hearings were, they were the hearings held in Canada on the 10th anniversary of 9/11, and they featured experts in various fields of 9/11 studies doing the real investigation that our government should have done. And, of course, representatives of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, as well as the 9/11 Commission and U.S. government bodies who produced official reports for these agencies, were invited to the Toronto hearings several times to participate, but they declined to do so. So they can't cry bias. They had the chance to speak up for themselves there. Now, the objectives of the hearings were fourfold. One, to present evidence that the U.S. government's official investigation into the events of 9/11, as pursued by various government and government-appointed agencies, is seriously flawed and has failed to describe and account for the 9/11 events. Two, to single out the most weighty evidence of the inadequacy of the U.S. government's investigation, to organize and classify that evidence, to preserve that evidence, to make that evidence widely known to the public and to governmental, non-governmental, and intergovernmental organizations. Three, to submit a record and a summary of the hearings, together with signed statutory declarations by witnesses to relevant governments, groups, and international agencies, with the request that a full and impartial investigation be launched into the events of September 11th, 2001, which have been used to initiate military invasions and to restrict the rights of citizens. And four, to engage the attention of the public, the international community, and the media through witness testimony, as well as through media events broadcasted via the internet during the 4-day event. Basically, the job that our current government officials, or unofficials as I always call them, should be doing. Now, video of the hearings is on the net for free, lots of it. Just go to YouTube and search for it there. The book itself looks very similar to the 9/11 omission report. You can get the Toronto hearings report on Amazon.com for around $20. So just look for it there. And the DVD that chronicled the conference activities, it's titled The Toronto Hearings on 9/11, Uncovering 10 Years of Deception. That was released in April of 2012, and that's available at the AE 9/11 Truth online store. So you can go to ae911truth.org and check that out too. Also at ae911truth.org, we got the latest installment of Adam Taylor's series of articles titled Debunking the Real 9/11 Myths, Why Popular Mechanics Can't Face Up to Reality. This is part 8 in the series, and Adam Taylor has been kind of taking his time tearing these popular mechanics folks to shreds with his work. He's kind of like a house cat playing with a mouse he's caught, just batting it around, having fun with it. And listeners of the show might remember that we had Adam on this program many months ago to talk about his articles. Well, you can read those articles and keep up with new ones as they come out right at ae911truth.org. This particular article is titled Part 8 WTC7 Wreckage Pile. In that he contests popular mechanics analysis, claiming that the actual collapse of World Trade Center 7 and the condition of the wreckage pile after a collapse can be explained by natural means rather than by demolition. So you can check that article out right there on the front page of ae911truth.org. And finally, we got at ae911truth.org, top NDAA critics learn about WTC evidence. This article is by Wayne Cost, who was on here a few weeks ago to talk about his 9/11 Science Truth outreach to civil liberty activists, and the article covers a lot of what we talked about with Wayne on this program, all right, about 9/11 Truth being the elephant in the room among those who justifiably rail against the symptoms of the 9/11 lie. But this article, it's got pictures, it's got written analysis, and it's something that should be featured as a guest op-ed on your blog or in your local newspaper. In fact, what you should be doing out there in listening land is printing out these stories that I'm mentioning and sending them to your local newspaper or on your local TV station or to your local police department. Well, Andy, they won't print it. So what? That's not the point. All right, you still submit it. You get it in their brains. All right, this is guerrilla info warfare we are engaged in against a well-funded, reinforced empire. All right, we can win. But what it will take is will. That's what wins everything. Will. All right? So you do sneak attacks. You undermine them by constantly doing the work of putting the news in the hands and in the minds of people, especially those in positions of power. All right? And don't be afraid of making them angry if the message happens to anger them. All right? We're digging up the sewer system of America, folks, with the work that we're doing here, and you better believe that before we achieve success, we're going to get some of it on us. But it don't matter, all right? Those people whose minds can't go there and who scream and wail and shut you out, they can go home and cry about it into their pillows, all right? It's a net you're casting here. And if you cast it wide enough, you're going to find people to join the cause, or you're going to put enough doubt in their heads to make them not go along with whatever agenda 9/11 is a part of furthering. All right, that in itself makes the whole effort worthwhile. Okay, so what we do every week, and we're going to do it now, is we take about 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families, and everybody whose lives have been ruined by the post-9/11 world. So we are going to take those 10 seconds of silence right now. Okay, and that's about 10 seconds. Now, we always remind you at this time that we do this 10 seconds of silence in this show, and why we do it. It's because lives have been lost and lives have been changed for the worse. Unless you're talking about psychopaths and military contractors who have made a killing, both figuratively and literally, after 9/11. Folks, if you don't stand for justice when the truth is so obvious, then you're not really living. All right? If you stand silent, and then others will stand silent when your kids are the victims of the next thing the perpetrators plan. All right? It's a community. It's a nation that we're defending here. So you need to be out on the front lines, just like these people that people will be featuring today on the show, people we featured on this program in the past. A lot of work is going into exposing this, and you can be part of that work. You need to be part of that work, because this is the fight of your generation. All right, we have two guests on the program today. Yaz Manley is the first one. Yaz has a background in broadcast journalism. She graduated from Cal State Northridge, getting a degree in journalism with an emphasis in political science. She started in radio doing news and traffic out in Los Angeles. She then moved to Dallas, Texas, where she worked for ABC International and wrote, produced, and voiced 2 programs for its international broadcast. After that, she worked exclusively as a commercial voiceover artist. Today, she volunteers for KPBS in San Diego, reading the newspaper for their radio reading service that goes out via special boxes to the sight impaired. And my other guest, Omar Musa, went to 2 years of engineering school at USC, then left to join the Army in 1982 and served as a medic in the 7th Special Forces Group until 1986. He became a registered nurse after he got out and has remained one since. He's got a degree in history from UCLA. Currently, they're working on a campaign called Citizens Aware and Asking. They're going to be talking about that today, but it's trying to get the Union of Concerned Scientists to provide the public with an honest evaluation of the recent scientific evidence which sheds new light on the events of September 11th. It's the Union of Concerned Scientists. Well, we got something they need to be concerned about. All right, the Yaz and Omar's website is citizensawareandasking.org. Yaz, Omar, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Well, thank you.
Now, I want to thank you guys for coming on the program today. Now, it was something we always ask our guests because we like to know kind of where people come from and their background and how they were drawn to this cause. First, Yaz, and then Omar, tell us, how did you awaken to the evidence for 9/11 truth and the controlled demolition of the towers, and what prompted you to do something about it?
Well, actually, it probably would be best if Omar, who's actually my brother also, he's the one that awakened me to the whole thing after his awakening, and mine just came fairly recently, in fact, really reluctantly. I fought it until I accidentally ended up going to a meeting, the West Coast launch of the Union of Concerned Scientists, because of an article I read in the paper about just a little meeting they were having, and my husband and I like to attend college seminars and things like that, so we thought it would be fun. But I also thought, just based on the name Union of Concerned Scientists, they would be concerned about the information regarding 9/11 that my brother kept trying to present to me that I was resisting. And so I called the architects and engineers to see if they could have somebody go and represent them and ask the question, just for curiosity. I thought it would be kind of amusing to me, based on not really being involved whatsoever. And they didn't have anybody, but they did help me construct a question. And for some strange reason, there were only about 5 people that got to ask a question within that 3-hour seminar, and mine was the very last question of the evening. And the response I got, which I can tell you more about later, but the response was telling, and actually when I first realized it's got to be absolutely true, because all these scientists would not have reacted this way in that meeting if there wasn't something to it. But Omar is actually the person who got me involved, so he might want to tell you the beginnings.
Sure, and actually, we're going to talk about that. That video's on YouTube. I saw that about an hour ago, and the reaction is interesting to say the least, and I wish that I was a little bit more wet behind the ears to say that it's shocking or surprising. It doesn't surprise me anymore, but it's very telling. Now, Omar, same question to you. How did you wake up, and what led you to 9/11 truth activism?
Well, for me, it kind of happened as a coincidence. I went up to visit my uncle in Seattle about 3 years ago. I had never actually thought about, 9/11 being anything other than more or less the way it was presented by the government up to that point. And but randomly, his daughter was acting in a play. She does local theater in Seattle, and so I just went with my uncle to see my cousin in a play. And it could have been a play about anything, but as it turned out, it was about 9/11. The play was called Yankee Tavern, and it was a fictional work based upon the collapse of Tower 7, the demolition of Tower 7. And but it was, it was a fictional work that it described the behind-the-scenes sort of activities of people involved. But the idea of the play was to get people's interest in Tower 7. So it was a form of activism, and didn't really think too much about it at the time I saw it. Although I wasn't shocked or anything by it, but it was later, maybe a month later, maybe more than that. But I just randomly took, because you never saw the collapse of Tower 7. You saw all these activities and this drama going on behind the scenes, but you never saw the actual physical collapse. And so finally one day I pulled up on YouTube collapse of Tower 7 and looked at it, and you look at it and that's the demolition, and then all of a sudden you get more interested, and that's kind of what happened.
Well, this is why I love doing the show. I have never heard of this play, Yankee Tavern, so I'm going to ask everybody out there in listening land to Google it and see if we can find a copy of the script or something like that. And maybe we'll get a link up on 9/11. What did you say?
I'm sorry. I said that the gentleman who wrote it is a playwright in New York, and I think he's fairly successful, but that was just a little side something that he felt he had to do out of conscience.
Well, and this is a lesson to the public. Again, you have no idea what you do, what kind of fruits your actions are going to spark, even if you think it's small. I mean, I woke up because somebody snuck a video into a joke site that was actually very serious about this topic, and I started looking it up, and here I am doing a radio show every week about it, getting the word out. So no, I mean that's very cool that this is what woke you up. So now, since you were the spark that touched your sister, what do you do? What were your first actions towards 9/11 truth activism? You're aware of this. What's the first thing that you did to try to get the word out?
I began looking into it more because there's a period of you're suspended between belief and disbelief when you start to see these physical things, and you realize what had to have happened, and yet on the other hand there's a part of your mind that says, no way, that couldn't have happened. So you're in this state, and so I just began researching and then finding the usual things. I'm sure the things that you found and that most people find, and the architects and engineers and Jim Hoffman. Actually, I think I just began a period of sort of intense investigation of just what's out there on the internet, and I stumbled on Jim Hoffman and David Chandler, and then watched those videos. And since I have, I think, a kind of a science-based mind, and those two basically at some point convinced me this is absolutely true. It has to be true. If the laws of the physics are true, then 9/11 truth is also true. And for me, that settled it. And then I kind of started prompting my sister to look into it. And then she went to that event, and just out of random chance, and got the question out, and once she saw the reaction, it's not just the reaction that you see in the video. There is a reaction after the video, where people came up to her, insiders came up to her, and essentially confirmed that they know what's going on, but they just are reluctant to do anything about it. And so.
Well, I want to hear more about that. Now, Yaz at first, and Omar, talk about Citizens Aware and Asking. How did you get the idea for it, which you've already answered to an extent here, but what is it about? You go elaborate.
What happened was after that meeting with the West Coast launch at the Center for Science and Democracy, where it was just very obvious to me that the people that were the players there were Nobel laureates and NASA people, and the room was just filled with scientific-minded people who paid 3 hours of lip service to freedom of science unhindered by democracy. And then the moderator was a journalist from the Annenberg School of Journalism who gave a big speech on freedom of the speech and how you have to be protected to ask the tough questions as a journalist. And she tried to cut me off mid-question, and then she didn't even really allow the panelists to answer. She said, out of time, out of scope, which my question was shorter than most of the questions that evening, and they had said they had time for one last question, and that was mine. And they did not allow for an answer. After that happened, and then I realized when I started making contact calls, and subsequently I was invited by somebody from A&E to try to go to the NSPE convention right after that, which is the National Society of Professional Engineers. And I sat in the lobby and took interviews, and I realized people were reluctant to talk to me if I represented a known group that they already had some connotation associated with, or if I was a nobody. So I started saying I was a citizen journalist, and why am I doing this? Is because I'm a citizen, I'm aware, and I'm asking you, and it sort of happened organically because people were much more inclined to talk to me if I was from something that mattered to them.
Okay, and for our listeners, what we're going to do right now is we're going to play a clip of Yaz talking to the Union of Concerned Scientists. And listen to this, folks, listen to this response. And again, I wish I could pretend that I'm shocked or surprised or even outraged. My emotions are kind of dulled to this now. But listen to this response and tell us what you think. We're going to play that clip right now.
Right? Mm-hmm. But it's that good information, accurately communicated, is a key part of a functioning democracy. And Lou's nodding, so I think I said that right. Good. Thanks.
So we have time for one more question, probably from the audience. If there's somebody who's been dying, had their hand up for a long time.
Lots of people dying.
We're all dying.
Maybe
okay,
one.
I think we have one back here.
Get Dan McGolden. He always asks good questions.
First, I want to thank you for establishing this new center. I wrote it out because I just don't want to say the wrong thing, and I'm kind of nervous in this audience. These are very noble goals, working against the politicization of science. And David, as you quote, only in an undemocratic regime can you have anti-science. And I'm not going to disagree with that. And there are reasons why scientists don't speak up even against a propensity of evidence. However, I want to ask how you explain not just the partisan but the bipartisan support for continuing the lack of evidence-based science used to perform such a vital role in government decision-making in regards to scientific facts, in particular with these 4 points. One of them, the free fall of World Trade Tower number 7, verifiable in high school physics, a tower not struck by a plane that crushed 82 structural feet with no explanation from NIST. Temperatures exceeding 4,000 feet, 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit. EPA recorded that NIST says fueled by office furnishings, not possible. Number 3, NIST's overt lack of transparency, calling secret computer simulations of the free fall explained only by what NIST calls one beam that failed. Let me just finish my question, then I'll just ask you what your response is.
Yeah.
And number 4, evidence of nanothermite in peer-reviewed articles that NIST says is outside their scope, and they do not intend to investigate.
Yeah.
How will you help facilitate the depolitization of these issues so that at least the science can be looked at, regardless of the outcome, just the science that's being unraveled?
This is, I'm sorry. We're out of time. And I think that's a little bit out of scope unless somebody wants to take it on of what we're talking about here. And I think that Peter wants to...
about the investigation. I'm not asking about an answer.
I don't know anything about it.
Like you.
Well, first, let me say I don't know anything about the specifics of that issue, but and so I'm not qualified to answer it, and so I won't try. But I would say that in any kind of democratic process, including the kind of town hall public dialogue that we're having here today, it's important that all voices have an opportunity to be expressed, that they not be suppressed. And so I appreciate you putting your ideas forward, and the fact that I can't answer them may I finish, please? Because this is my turn to put my voice forward. I have no basis for making a judgment on your on either your facts or your opinions, and I'm assuming that no one else on the panel does either. So I'm now going to turn to some closing remarks. I want to thank Casey and the panelists for their vigorous engagement.
Now, what's going through your mind there as you're getting this stonewalling?
My adrenaline was going so fast because I've never done anything like this, and I was told if I was going to try this, to have my husband videotape from afar. Everything was going through my head, and I was trying so hard to use the words they used to in their speeches to let them know why this was so important, because they had made a comment, only in an anti-democratic society can you have anti-science. And so I tried to just give that back to them in their own words. And I was writing and constructing and trying to figure out how to exactly ask the questions that I didn't hardly even understand myself, because I had just become aware of some of this. And when Casey Cole, who was from the Annenberg School of Journalism, stood up and went, no, like, and was gesticulating for me to stop, I realized that I was experiencing censorship from somebody who just said we should not censor people. And I just was shocked, but not shocked. And then when the moderator came in to just field my question and fluff it away, I knew he was doing that, and I tried to respond like, I just want my question answered. It was kind of funny because I didn't notice until later on that one of the persons on the panel said, I don't know anything about that topic, and another one giggles and says, lucky you. And it was just funny because it was this question that nobody wanted to field, and it was so obvious, and I knew right away I was getting the brush off. And it was obvious, and somebody in the audience had asked me to stop, but I was also the only person there that got applause that day in that room. And so I knew there was more to it, and then there was a line of people waiting to talk to me afterwards. I thought I was going to just beat feet and get out of there because I was embarrassed, but then I decided once I saw that they opened up a backdrop to the ocean, and it was just beautiful. It was at the Scripps Center for Oceanography, and there was a big party afterwards with food and everything. I thought, I'm going to stay because I don't want to be associated with some crazy conspiratorial question in the room, and I want to see what these people think of it. And my husband and I separated, and he actually heard people within these scientific groups saying, well, if 2 planes could strike those buildings the way they did and take 3 buildings down, why couldn't somebody load them with explosives? And the questions I got and the comments I got throughout the day just confirmed it from people way on up in the scientific world. And actually somebody from NIST, previously from NIST, sealed it for me with his response.
Well, what do you mean by fielded with you?
It just was obvious, just that NIST. There was the implication that, I'm going to protect people because they've been very friendly to me, and I know that lots of these people might even really wish they could find some way to confirm and back the science, because they certainly won't confirm the NIST government report. I can't get one of them to validate that, but I can get many to say, oh, it's really interesting, or NIST never wanted the job. They just wished it would go away and be somebody else's problem. And things like that were said to me from people who knew, inside people. And I just was, right then, it was like, these people they know that the NIST story doesn't hold water. And that's when I finally realized if they won't even confirm the NIST story, and they won't bash mine. They wouldn't call the questions I asked anything, crazy, conspiratorial, anything. They said they're valid questions. It just was very telling, to say the least.
Well, it's funny, too, you mentioned about being embarrassed. There's no reason that you should even be embarrassed. Who should be embarrassed is the Union of Concerned Scientists and these people who are nudging you and avoiding the issue, a very issue that they should be concerned about. I mean, the word concerned scientist is in their title, and this is a very concerning topic. Even for people who are on the fence, they still question Building 7. I see it in my own activism and in talking to people, and I mean, they're completely avoiding it. And you say that they won't even validate NIST's findings, but they won't address yours. It's like they know the truth, but they are afraid. They're cowards, in my opinion. They're cowards because they won't do their job to be a scientist, to look at the evidence objectively and do their work, do the work of proving or disproving what NIST has produced. And again, the implications for this are huge. It's not just some vague scientific theory or principle that we're talking about that can be debated for the next 200 years without having any consequence on anyone's lives. All right, the consequences that we felt from 9/11 in the last 11 years have been huge and far-reaching and have devastated people's lives. So this is something we want to make sure. Again, even if you're just somebody out there on the fence, like you were when you went to that conference, Yaz, you want to make sure that you got it right. And you're doing, there's as Jesse Ventura, who everybody likes to giggle about because he was a wrestler, but he was also an underwater demolitions expert, says, there's no stupid questions. There are no dumb questions. If you don't understand something, ask, okay? Because people, in the Army, people's survival depends on you understanding what you're doing. Well, in America and in our republic, people need to understand truth, too. They need to understand why they're at war and why current events, why their civil liberties are being taken away. So there are no stupid questions, and I say that to people out there who are on the fence. Ask questions, even if you're skeptical of me or of the information we bring. Ask the questions, because our republic depends on it. Now, Omar, you saw your sister be stonewalled. Now, you may have been aware that of this bizarre phenomenon that we're witnessing, and which will be studied in future generations here in America. In relation to this topic and the mass neurosis of people that want to avoid it. What are you thinking as you watched this, or when you heard about it?
Well, I mean, once you told me about it, it was the way that it kind of confirms, what is provable through physics. I mean, it's kind of almost regardless whether it confirms or denies it, because once you have a physics proof of something, people's behavior is not relevant specifically, but obviously the behavior just is as expected, and we kind of started to see what the pattern is, and the pattern, the stereotypical response to this from sort of establishment people, not that they were involved in this, is that they don't know anything about it. It's outside the scope of their expertise. They lack funding, and we started to get these same responses over and over again, and then they were all been summarized on our website, especially with respect to the concerned scientists, and we just felt like, we wanted to drag a response out of them somehow, or let's just say persuade a response out of them. So what we did was we just felt like that if we could make it so obvious, and for future generations, because this will be, like you said, this will be studied in the future, and people's roles are going to be known, and I think that they would like their role at present. They would like to present themselves as uninformed, and we want to make it clear that no, you're not going to go down as uninformed. You're going to go down as actively avoiding doing this. So that's kind of how my response to that led to this sort of website.
And we've talked about that before. The purpose of this program here is to bring on everybody that's speaking out, the experts speaking out. Well, we're having them speak out here on the program too, along with the AE's movie, and also the activists like yourselves who are doing something, so that in the future, regardless of how this battle turns out, future generations will know that Americans did not just mindlessly follow their government over a cliff like lemmings. There were people who knew the truth, that were screaming it, and it wasn't everybody's fault that justice wasn't found. I think justice will be accomplished, but even if it's not, we create a record. And what you're doing is creating a record here with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and this is important, and it's again like Mark Graham, who we had on a few weeks ago, when inserting himself into the Larry Silverstein lawsuit against the insurance companies and getting the controlled demolition evidence on the record. We are graffitiing history books with the scientific evidence put out by AE 9/11 Truth that screams that this is a lie. We were lied to. It's very obvious, and we're saying, hey, this doesn't sit right. We need a real investigation, and they're completely ignoring you guys. So this is what Citizens Aware and Asking is about. Can you talk a little bit more about your movement and what it entails to take on the Union of Concerned Scientists and get them to address this?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it can really be termed a movement. It's basically a campaign. Initially, what we initially had wanted to do was to get people to basically download just the title page of the Jones and Harris paper. I'm sure you've had that or discussed that, where they've identified the academic material on the desk, and which is one of the questions that Yaz asked publicly and was reported asking of the Union of Concerned Scientists to provide an evaluation of that science. What we're attempting to do is to get people to print off the title page of that study, and ideally to send it by certified mail to the Union of Concerned Scientists, photograph the receipt, and email us a copy of the receipt. And the idea was that we would have this documented record that, here you are on video being asked the question. Here are receipts that you have been sent the study itself. And so really there's no way you're going to be able to feign ignorance of this at any point in the future. It's something you're going to have to live with. That was that was the initial idea, and it was just. I mean, I don't know that it's the best idea, but it was the only thing we could come up with, you know. That's we did that, and then subsequently we've kind of decided to maybe drop the certified. Well, we still suggest and hope that people would do it that way, but people we were kind of learning that people don't really do much, to be honest. So. You know,
well, we're in the business of changing that. And I think, no, I mean, you say you don't know if it's the right thing. Look, folks, if you're in the arena, if you're swinging punches, you are doing the right thing, okay? Just engage them. Take them on and do what you can. I think the certified mail idea is a good idea, but even if folks, even if you don't want to pay for the certified mail, still write them, get some kind of record on it. And the website is citizensawareandasking.org, okay? It's spelled just the way it sounds. And right there on your site, right, you got instructions on how to do this, on how to write to them.
I think also just to add that the good idea behind it was, you feel so powerless in this, and rather than by trying to move the population generally towards something or to move the government towards something, if you focus on one organization that already has media access and prestige, we might be able, as a movement, disparate or unified, to move one organization that already has some leverage and media access, and that was in that manner we would increase, we would leverage our influence. That was the hope.
Well, absolutely, and there's different kinds of activism, or maybe two tiers of it. There's the outreach to the general public, your average man on the street, and then there's the big pillars, like the Union of Concerned Scientists, and people, like you said, with prestige and power. And it's important to reach out to both of them, and people choose their own specifics, but, you reach out to your fellow man, your average citizens, who are resting on these pillars, and you create enough weight on these big pillar organizations, like Union of Concerned Scientists, that they may break and have to acknowledge this. So, but both tiers are very important, and especially with what you guys are doing, informing them and getting it on the record, because that publicly embarrasses them. And I'm not worried about publicly embarrassing people. Okay, I mean, my opinion, the hurt feelings of somebody who's covering up a mass murder, and especially on this scale, are collateral damage in the fight for justice and truth. So, it is important to put them on the spot and do exactly what you are doing. And folks, people who sit around waiting for a leader to show up, well, I mean, look at Omar and Yaz here. They are providing you with the outline. All you have to do is follow the instructions and write the letter. And there is a letter up on ae911truth.org, and I haven't really talked about it much on this broadcast. We're going to actually talk about it hopefully more on the next broadcast, by Richard Gage, where he is writing to law enforcement officials. Well, that is a great outline for your own letter. Grab it, copy and paste it, change it enough to have it be from you, and send that if you don't know what to write. The evidence is listed there, and it can actually direct them to our law enforcement page as well. Just reaching out to the Union of Concerned Scientists and letting them know this information with the nanothermite paper and sending them to the AE911 Truth evidence page will show exactly like Omar and Yaz are saying, that they were informed, that they chose deliberately to sit by and let this lie be covered up, and their grandkids will see that, and they will feel that shame of knowing that. Now, switching gears here, yes, one thing that we always encourage people to do on this show is, we always want to support groups like Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth and Scientists for 9/11 Truth also is a new group, great new group out there. We had Dr. Andre Rousseau on the program last week to talk about his paper on the seismic signals coming from the World Trade Center collapses. But, what we always encourage people to do is do the groundwork of getting the information out to wide audiences, and you've been doing that with your outreach to PBS, for AE911 Truth, getting experts speak out on. You want to talk about what you're doing?
Yeah, well, that's actually something that actually happened kind of spontaneously, too, because I'm a volunteer for the I read the newspaper for the sight impaired on a voice service at KPBS a couple times a month as a volunteer, and I've always done books on tape and things like that for the sight impaired in the past. And so I noticed that A&E was working very hard to get their document, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out there. And I was already at a PBS station, so I actually had somebody in the inside kind of discuss with me how you would approach PBS stations, make up a press release, and whatnot. And really it started out as I was just hoping I was going to take all the information that me and my brother had, and I was going to just set it on the desk, and somebody at PBS was going to go, aha, here's a story. And it started out, because I just thought that's what you did. You gave these stories to investigative journalists, and they took them over, and PBS is a public investigative service, is what I had thought. And so I actually tried to contact PBS in the beginning because they're the ones that covered the entire West Coast launch of UCS, and I wanted to say, hey, here's a story. Did you look at this question at the end of the launch that you covered? You know, they had it. I think they uplinked the whole webcam on their broadcast. So, but they weren't interested in the least, and I ended up getting a click on the phone eventually. I was on the other end of a hang-up, but and I tried to do it as nice as I could, but then I just realized I was scrambling to turn over this because I had no avenue as when you first come about realizing that there's some truth to all the science and forensic evidence behind 9/11. Then you're frustrated. I was, at least, frustrated as to where to vent it, where to put this, what to do. I had no avenue. So I started consulting with somebody who said, hey, maybe make up a press release, put together some of your information, make it cohesive. And I started to do that, and I realized it was the anniversary of September 11th this past year, and all the coverage was just your basic coverage. And I just sat in my desk, and I'm a voiceover person by nature, and I just started making up passive-aggressive public service announcements for 9/11, the way I would have aired it. And it turned out I offered them up to A&E, and I told them I want to work to get experts speak out there because I do believe it's important, it's valid. I've presented it now to, I can't tell you how many experts who, even the scientific magazines, I'm sending it everywhere to get endorsements, and all I get is, it's very interesting, very intriguing. I find the questions posed extremely valid. However, it's too controversial for us to touch. And it's the same thing. But so then I just started doing an official outreach on behalf of the producer, Richard Gage, and offering it up. I'm currently in contact with every PBS station, either directly or indirectly. I have 100 and something odd contacts, and many of them are interested. We're just at a stage where I'm waiting for, I didn't realize how important closed captioning was, because that, again, leaves out ESO just got closed captioning because it leaves out an entire audience. Right. And so they just applied for and received their closed captioning, and I believe a station is about to pick it up in February. Colorado CPT-12 was a daring station that aired it originally, and we've used that as a vehicle to get other stations interested, and I have so many interested. However, I'm combating the fact that they thought that NOVA had answered all these questions, regarding 9/11, and they don't need to revisit it because NOVA was the definitive answer, and they didn't realize that NOVA's answer didn't even correlate with the government's final hypothesis. So it's just interesting, but they're very interested in their now I'm not sure what kind of resistance will be met in the future, but for now there's an interest, and we're just waiting for some of the technical aspects to come through, and it might be hopefully aired nationally, in which case then it would be very important to have these scientists be either ahead of the game or right with it when it happens, because if all the public's going to know, I sure hope our scientists, that the Union of Concerned Scientists and our members of the American Society of Civil Engineers step on board.
Well, and it's funny, too. I mean, if it gets aired nationally and we got on record that these concerned scientists or concerned in name-only scientists, have gotten the information, they're going to be behind the ball with the rest of America. And that, you talk about you being embarrassed by their stonewalling. Well, they're going to be 100 times embarrassed by their own stonewalling, by their own misdeeds and in not addressing this. So that's great work. Now, it's funny, you mentioned how they got onto Colorado TV. What do you think is so different about Colorado that, the people of Colorado or the individuals you dealt with, and you don't have to list names or anything like that, but what kind of difference are you perceiving from that success than from the other people who, say it's intriguing, interesting, but it's just too controversial?
I think there are some people that really believe the old school investigative journalist lines, and the concept of objectivity and really want to find the stories that matter and are willing to risk because of it. And I think it's very rare because everybody wants to put dinner on the table. But I think that might be the difference. I can't really speak to exactly what that program director was thinking, but I do believe that Colorado takes some chances where others might not. And I'm hoping, I think there are a few that might be considering doing that as well, but definitely old school journalistic integrity.
Now, when you aired it when it got aired on Colorado, did they report any kind of results to you? Did they say, "Oh man, we had people calling us saying, oh no, this is terrible," or we had our ratings spike? Did they report anything like that to you?
Yes. If you look at the site, in fact, it's in the press release that I send to the other program directors. They were the most watched, most shared video. They had a huge fundraising drive that was extremely beneficial. And if you look at the hits the YouTube video got from it, because it was linked on the national PBS site for a while, it was, I think, it had, I can't remember what last I looked at it, but it was past 250,000 hits on it. And it was really, I would say, almost all supportive language. And when you just watch the way people were rating and talking about it, it was extremely well received.
Well, it's funny too. You would think that PBS, which it seems to always be begging for money whenever I turn it on, just purely from a earthly greed base perspective. If you're looking to raise money and you have Colorado, the Colorado PBS raising all this money because they showed experts speak out and it's a juicy topic and people are interested, or they either have a deep interest or they are maybe on the fence but curious, that they would want to air it just for that particular reason, to get people tuning in to PBS, and so it's just very interesting that you have the success with Colorado, but it's you're working hard to get it success in other areas. It's just interesting to see that kind of hesitant response, even though you've already had that success.
Well, actually, I think they've been rather warm, I think, and they all have their reasons. They all have their reasons for not taking risk. And like I said, NOVA was a big disservice to the science, and yet NOVA is so highly respected that it's something to combat. The fact that NOVA did try to run a definitive answer to it, but I don't think I don't think it's insidious, and I don't know that they would all even want to consider fundraising. Every PBS station, they're run sort of as affiliates or sister stations, but they do maintain some independence as well. So I don't know. I feel like I've received a very, very good response and good contacts. I'm hoping that many follow through with what they've said. But PBS is used to getting stuff vetted nationally from third-party organizations if they run an independent producer. So it might just be the channels that most of them use, and CPT 12 doesn't adhere to the same confines. So
now, Omar, switching back to your campaign here, Citizens Aware and Asking.org, because I want to make sure I get this question in here before we end today. What's the end game? So you get the Union of Concerned Scientists on record as having received this information, and they either respond and address it, or it's crickets. They just sit there and do nothing. Right. Do you have have you planned for the next step, or have any plans for the future?
As far as an end game, obviously the end game for us is the same as the end game for all the movement, and that is that this is exposed and that everybody knows it. But what we're trying to do is it's kind of like maybe we recognize that a lot of what happens is you have the scientists within the 9/11 Truth Movement who are making these assertions. You have NIST who's made another interpretation of what happened, and there's not really these outside pre-existing entities, organizations that are willing to come in and basically weigh in on the side of one or the other. You know what I mean? They have all chosen silence, and we're trying to at least get I guess you could call it a third-party validation, where we're not actually telling them what to come up with. For all we know, they won't, but the Union of Concerned Scientists could come out and say that the NIST report is very rock solid, valid science. So for us, our end game is just to keep sort of trying to persuade the Union of Concerned Scientists to give us an opinion on this. And then that'll hopefully fit into the big picture overall to some extent, because they already have prestige, and they're already on public radio and public television and quoted and Democracy Now! And all these shows, and highly respected them and there. And so now the 9/11 Truth movement could, whether it's architects, engineers, or scientists from 9/11 Truth or whoever, can come out and say, well, the Union of Concerned Scientists has backed this, and they've been around since the 60s. So it's not like I think people tend to be dismissive of the science. I mean, it's easy. I think it's a consciously fostered strategy on the part of someone to you kind of just try to attack the credibility of the scientists within the 9/11 Truth movement, and so what we're trying to do is get scientists who are not in the 9/11 Truth movement per se, but who are already, their credibility is already recognized, and say, okay, well, give us an opinion. Who's right on this? And that's kind of where we're at. But our end game is the same as everybody's end game. We want to see this exposed, and we want to see a more sensible world.
Well, absolutely, and and what I want to stress to our audience here is that Omar and Yaz here are not even, they're not asking the Union of Concerned Scientists to even endorse AE 9/11 Truth evidence. They're asking them to look at it, to either endorse it or refute it, to look at it objectively, and that's the important thing, because it's science. That's the scientific method, but they're not even doing that. And I think that I want our audience to really take note of that, is that they're not even, they're not coming out and saying, oh, NIST is solid science, and you guys are completely out of line. All right, they're just avoiding it. Now, what does that tell you? And I'm saying this to the audience. What does that tell you? They're avoiding the issue. They're not backing up NIST claims, but they also don't want to come out and say that it's wrong either. They are avoiding it like the plague because they are scared for whatever reason. And I'm sure that, and individually they're nice people, but at the same time they have a responsibility to not be afraid to speak out, because we know that National Institute of Standards and Technology are not going to do that for us. They're not going to correct their own work. They're not going to come out and say, okay, yeah, we lied. Go ahead and slap handcuffs on me now. I'll go to prison. They're not going to do that, so we need to do that, and we need to get these organizations that purport to represent the people and represent the grassroots to practice what they preach. Now, yes, for yourself, what is your end game? And what I mean is, we're all looking for this to be exposed and to be able to move on with our lives, but what's your next step in your activism?
Well, I'm starting to grow weary with the discredit, deny, and delay technique, but I do feel like my end game is to encourage these organizations to really represent the people and take back our democracy. And additionally, it's not just the Union of Concerned Scientists. I've had ongoing communications with the heads of ASCE, and they use the same techniques. They're underqualified and underfunded to answer to the very organization that they champion funding for. So hopefully there's a lot of engineers listening who might just want to ask the ASCE on behalf of themselves to address this. I'm hoping to stimulate enough experts and citizens that I feel like I am in a democracy, because right now it doesn't really feel like it.
What is the ASCE for our audience? American Society of Civil Engineers. Okay, so to get them to acknowledge it.
They put out a big press release saying that they couldn't wait to dive into the NIST reports, and right now they don't have the funding to read the NIST reports, or that's sort of the gist I'm getting from them. I've talked to their press agents, and they haven't even responded to their own press release regarding their follow-up on the NIST report.
So they can't wait to dive in, but now they're kind of like the wimpy kid on the diving board, standing there with his toe dangling off and afraid to jump in the big pool of water at the bottom, and everyone's watching them now. Well, we got to get everybody watching them and tell them to jump.
Right. I'm not sure if they've been waiting on the diving board because they'd be awfully cold. It's been 2006 since the press release was released.
And you had something to say, Omar?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to say that with ASCE, it's even a little more complicated than that, since they were the initial investigative, select volunteer members from ASCE were the initial people on site at Ground Zero, and who basically, I guess, sort of rambled around the perimeter of the place while virtually, all the evidence, in the case of Tower 7, all the evidence was being destroyed. So there are people within that organization who are likely actively complicit in the crime, or at least in the cover-up. They're a little bit of a harder case in the sense, rather than the Union of Concerned Scientists, which we're certain had, they weren't actively or passively involved in the initial cover-up, but have subsequently have become sort of passively complicit. So that's the thing about ASC, and then their responses have been super telling too, because the director has emailed us and said explicitly that he is not qualified to evaluate the NIST report on Tower 7's collapse, for example, which means that I don't know if there's anybody in the world that is best qualified to evaluate it, and we had basically asked them for an endorsement of it. It's sort of almost as a comical, sort of I guess an ironic approach, where rather than trying to get them to say anything about 9/11 truth, we're like, okay, we're trying to get engineers to actively endorse and admit that they've read the NIST reports on the tower collapses, and in particular Tower 7, and it's virtually impossible. You can't get engineers to admit to having read Tower 7's report and to actually believing their thermal expansion unseats one column causes global collapse hypothesis. It's just it's quite amazing. So.
The silence is deafening, and it's almost like, they speak out for wanting to have truth and transparency, blah, blah, blah. When somebody comes out and says, all right, let's do it, I need a volunteer, then it's like everybody steps back, or their hands remain firmly at their sides, and that is what we're seeing here. With and your efforts are highlighting that. I'd like to do an episode someday. Maybe I'll do this. I'm brainstorming right now here on the air. I'd love to get some marching orders from you guys on who to call, and make some phone calls and record it and play it on the air here, just so we have a verbal record that and that Joe Blow, me, just called them and let them know. We'll see. We'll look at the logistics of that.
Well,
guys,
I have a whole list of people that I can give you to do that, and our next step is possibly even to read the NIST as a book on tape and send it to them for their holiday present next year or something, so they can listen to it.
I think we should do a dramatic interpretation of it. Anything that, just to make it as easy as, but maybe make a cartoon, or something. I don't know, hand puppets, shadow puppets, to make it as easy for them to view it as possible, so they have no excuses. That's why I love what you guys are doing.
Done that. The NIST has put out their little 5-minute summary video where they basically nutshell their whole hypothesis, and that's why I think any competent scientist can look at that and in that 5 minutes realize that they're getting snowed. So it doesn't take long.
Absolutely. Guys, we are out of time. Yaz, Omar, I want to thank you for what you're doing. This is the kind of work that I want to implore the masses to do, and they can look to you as role models. Thank you for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Well, thank you.
We are out of time. Remember, folks, you can listen to us every week at Thursday, 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern on No Lies Radio. This is Andy Steele saying goodbye, and we will talk to you again next week.